was supposed to be a quiet morning, until someone pushed the wrong man too far. What happened next will leave you speechless. Watch until the end to see why the world still calls him a legend. Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. The city was still stretching its limbs when Mike Tyson stepped into the quiet morning, the sun barely above the rooftops, casting a warm golden hue across the pavement. Dressed in a dark hoodie, black jeans, and low-slung cap, he moved with the calm of a man who had seen too much, survived too much, and now craved only simplicity. His eyes, hidden behind sunglasses, scanned the mostly empty street. A few early commuters walked with coffee in hand, but for the most part, it was the hour of stillness, a sacred time before the chaos of the day took hold. That's what Mike loved about mornings. No cameras, no noise, just the quiet hum of a world not yet fully awake. He turned the corner and spotted a small cafe nestled between a laundromat and a bookstore. It had a faded awning, old wooden chairs visible through the front window, and a warmth that pulled at something deep inside him. The kind of place that didn't care who you were, where you could just be. Perfect. The bell above the door jingled as he entered. Inside, the scent of freshly ground coffee beans and warm cinnamon rolls greeted him. The atmosphere was cozy, familiar, like stepping into a memory. Mike approached the counter. The young woman behind it, early 20s, curly hair pulled into a neat bun, looked up with a tired but polite smile. "Good morning," she said. "What can I get you?" "Black coffee, please. No sugar," he replied. She nodded and turned to pour his drink. Her name tag read Erica. She moved quickly, efficiently, but there was a weariness in her shoulders, a tension in her eyes that Mike didn't miss. He recognized that look. It lived in people who were used to being treated like they didn't matter. He took a seat at a corner table, back to the wall, facing the door. Old habit. As he sipped his coffee, he glanced around. A man in a business suit was typing away on a laptop. An elderly couple quietly shared a scone near the window. Nothing unusual, just peace. But peace is a fragile thing. The cafe door burst open, the bell crashing against the wood. 4 men walked in. Broad, loud, dressed in leather jackets covered in patches. Bikers. The leader, a tall red-haired man with a long scar down his cheek and a skull tattoo creeping up his neck, scanned the room like he owned it. They laughed loudly, cursed without regard, boots stomping heavily on the tile floor. Mike's gaze shifted slightly, but he didn't move. He didn't react. He simply watched. The bikers headed for the counter, pushing past a customer who stumbled out of their way. Erica stepped forward, professional, though her voice trembled just slightly. "Can I help you?" The red-haired biker leaned over the counter, too close. "Yeah, sweetheart, give us 4 coffees, extra hot. And smile a little, will you?" She tried. "Coming right up." One of the others reached across and picked up a cookie from the display case. "We'll take these too. On the house, right?" He laughed. Erica hesitated. "I'm sorry, but I can't give out free food." The biker's expression darkened. "What'd you say?" Mike's chair creaked as he stood. He walked slowly toward the counter, placing his empty cup on it. His voice was calm, measured. "She said no." All 4 men turned. The redhead sneered. "Look who's trying to play the hero. You look familiar, old man." "I'm not here to fight," Mike said. "Just leave her alone." The redhead stepped closer. "Wait a second. I know you. You're Mike freaking Tyson." Mike didn't respond. The man grinned. "Well, how about that? The champ himself. You think being famous means you can tell me what to do?" "No," Mike said. "Being a decent person does." The biker laughed, loud and harsh. Then, without warning, he grabbed a coffee pot from behind the counter and poured it over Erica's head. She screamed as the hot liquid soaked her hair and uniform. The cafe went silent. The elderly couple gasped. The businessman stood frozen mid-type. Mike's face changed. Not with rage, but with focus. Complete, deadly focus. He reached for a napkin, gently handed it to Erica, who stood trembling, tears in her eyes. "Go wash up," he said softly. She nodded and stumbled toward the back room. The redhead chuckled. "Oops. Hope that didn't mess up her pretty little hairdo." Mike looked him dead in the eye. "You're going to regret that." The man threw up his hands in mock fear. "Oh, no. Is the champ gonna punch me? Gonna cry about it?" "I don't want to hurt anyone," Mike said one last time. "Too bad," the biker said, stepping forward, fists raised. Mike didn't move at first. Then, with the speed and precision only a trained fighter could possess, he dodged the punch, stepped in, and delivered a clean right uppercut to the man's jaw. The redhead's eyes rolled back before his body hit the floor with a sickening thud. Chairs scraped. The other three bikers jumped back in surprise. Mike stood still, calm, centered, ready, and the cafe would never forget what happened next. The red-haired biker lay sprawled across the floor unconscious, his body twisted awkwardly between two tables. For a moment, the cafe froze in absolute silence. Every eye was on Mike Tyson. No one moved, not even the other three bikers, who stared at their fallen friend with a mix of disbelief and growing rage. The elderly couple had taken cover behind their table. The businessman slowly closed his laptop and ducked beneath the counter. Somewhere in the back, the sound of running water hinted that Erica was trying to rinse the scalding coffee from her hair, unaware what had just happened in the front room. Mike stood in the same spot, his breathing slow, his shoulders relaxed. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't shouted or cursed. He had acted with the precision of a man who had spent his life in rings, cages, and dark corners of the world where violence was currency. And yet, in that moment, he looked more tired than angry, like he had hoped, just for once, that he wouldn't have to use that part of himself again. One of the bikers, a thick-set man with a black beard and rings on every finger, stepped forward with a low growl. "You think you can knock out Frankie and just walk out of here?" His fists clenched. "You picked the wrong day, old man." Mike didn't flinch. "I gave your friend a chance to walk away. I'm giving you one now." The bearded man didn't wait. With a roar, he lunged, swinging a wild right hook. Mike sidestepped with ease, caught the man's arm mid-swing, and used his momentum to slam him chest first into the counter. The biker wheezed, trying to catch his breath, but Mike wasn't finished. A quick jab to the side of the head sent the man tumbling to the floor, groaning, blood trickling from his mouth. The second biker, younger, wiry, with tattoos crawling up his neck, pulled a chair from under a table and charged like a bull. He swung it high, aiming for Mike's head, but Mike dropped low, the wooden seat whistling past his ear. He planted his foot and launched an upward strike to the biker's abdomen, folding him instantly. The young man dropped the chair, wheezed, then received a sharp left hook that sent him spinning to the ground. 3 down, 1 left. The final biker stood frozen, holding a chain in both hands, his mouth slightly open. His eyes flicked from his fallen companions to the former heavyweight champion, now walking slowly toward him. Mike raised one brow. "Still feel like you've got something to prove?" The biker swallowed hard. I didn't even touch her, man. It was Frankie." "You stood there and watched," Mike replied. The man dropped the chain and backed toward the door. "I'm done. I'm out." Mike stopped walking and nodded. "Good choice." The biker turned and bolted from the cafe, his boots slapping loudly against the tile floor. A second later, the bell above the door jangled violently as it slammed shut behind him. Mike looked down at the three men groaning on the floor, his face unreadable. From the back, Erica reappeared, her hair wet, her uniform stained, but she walked with a new kind of posture, a quiet, trembling strength. When she saw the scene before her, she froze. Are you okay?" she asked. Mike nodded. "Are you?" She nodded back slowly, clutching a damp towel in her hands. The cafe remained silent for a long beat. Then the elderly man behind the table slowly stood and began clapping. His wife joined him. Then the businessman. One by one, the few remaining customers applauded, not loudly, not as an audience to a spectacle, but as people who had just witnessed justice in motion. Mike shook his head and raised a hand. "Don't cheer," he said quietly. "I didn't want this." The cafe door opened again, but this time it wasn't another biker. It was a police officer, his eyes scanning the room in confusion, his hand already resting on his holstered weapon. Behind him, two more officers appeared. "What the hell happened here?" the first one asked, stepping forward. The customers started speaking all at once, pointing at the men on the floor, describing how Mike had protected the waitress, how the bikers started it. The officer turned to Erica. "Is that true?" She nodded. "They poured hot coffee on me. He tried to stop them. They attacked him." The officer's eyes turned to Mike. Recognition flickered in them. "You're Mike Tyson." Mike nodded slowly. "I tried to avoid this. They didn't let me." The officer looked at the unconscious men, then back at Mike. "You want to press charges?" "No," Mike said. "They already got what they came for." The officers exchanged glances, then began checking the biker's vitals. One groaned and tried to sit up, only to collapse again. Another muttered something unintelligible through broken teeth. As the police worked, Erica walked over to Mike. Her voice was quiet but firm. "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you weren't here." Mike looked at her, then at the people around them. "You stood your ground. That matters." One of the officers cuffed the groaning redhead, now barely regaining consciousness. As they lifted him, he spat blood and glared at Mike. "You'll pay for this. You hear me? Mike stepped forward slightly. "No, you already did." The officer shoved the man toward the door. "Let's get him out of here." As the bikers were led away, the energy in the cafe slowly returned to normal. People sat down again. The businessman reopened his laptop. The elderly couple returned to their scone. Erica started to clean the floor. Mike grabbed a napkin and helped her wipe up the spilled coffee. "You should never have to deal with that," he said. "Maybe not," she replied, "but I'm glad someone like you was here when it happened." He gave her a small smile, then turned to the manager behind the counter, who had just emerged from the back room, pale and wide-eyed. "Your staff's brave," Mike said. "Take care of them." The manager nodded rapidly. Anything she wants." Mike placed a few bills on the counter for the coffee. Then he turned to leave. As he stepped outside into the brightening morning, he could feel the warmth of the sun on his face, but also something else. A familiar tightness in his chest, a sense that this wasn't over. Not yet. The fresh air outside the cafe felt heavier than before. Mike Tyson stepped into the morning light with slow, deliberate steps, the kind of movement that came not from exhaustion but from anticipation. He could feel it in the back of his mind, a familiar presence that had haunted him all his life, the knowledge that peace, for people like him, never lasted long. The confrontation inside the cafe had ended. but the threat hadn't. He had seen it in the red-haired biker's eyes as the cops dragged him out, hatred, raw and seething, and something else, a warning. Mike adjusted his hood and walked down the block, his pace calm but focused. His instincts were louder than the city sounds. The street was waking up now. Delivery trucks parked along the curb, commuters rushing into coffee shops, horns echoing from crosswalks. But beneath that familiar hum, something else tugged at him. A signal from years of survival. He turned down a quieter street, away from traffic, toward a more residential block where brownstones stood in even rows. He needed space to think, to breathe, and to feel out the shadows. Half a block ahead, something shifted in his peripheral vision. A reflection in a car window, a glint of metal. He didn't react, not visibly, but he took note. There were two of them. One standing at the end of the sidewalk near a lamp post, pretending to smoke. The other leaning against a wall with his arms crossed, his eyes locked onto Mike's back. It didn't take a genius to recognize them. The two bikers who had fled the cafe before the cops showed up. Mike kept walking. He turned the next corner, narrowing the gap between himself and the industrial alley ahead, just wide enough for a delivery truck, just quiet enough to be trouble. As he stepped into the alley's mouth, the morning light dimmed, cut off by the buildings towering on either side. Footsteps echoed behind him. Then another sound, deeper, more distant, the low growl of engines. Mike stopped walking. Two motorcycles turned the far corner of the alley, boxing him in from both ends. The engines idled, blocking any exit, the sound reverberating off the brick walls. 4 men in total. Same faces, same aggression. But now it was personal. Now it was revenge. The red-haired leader wasn't there, but his lieutenants were. Mike slowly turned around, his stance loose but balanced, his eyes calm. He didn't speak. The first man stepped forward, the wiry one with the snake tattoo wrapping around his neck. He was holding a chain now, its links rattling with each step. "You made us look weak, Tyson," he growled. "You embarrassed us in front of everyone." Mike said nothing. The burly one with the beard, the one who'd taken a body blow earlier, cracked his knuckles and spat on the ground. No cops here now, no cameras, just us. Mike's gaze drifted over their shoulders. No pedestrians, no bystanders, just the alley, the 4 men, and him. "Go home," he said finally. His voice wasn't a threat, it was a mercy. They didn't take it. The chain swung fast, a whistling blur of metal aimed at his side. Mike moved in a flash, stepping forward instead of back. He caught the chain mid-swing, yanked the biker off balance, and drove a hard elbow into his chest. The man folded, crumpling to one knee, choking on air. The second man rushed in from behind, the bearded one with a metal pipe. Mike twisted, ducked under the wild swing, and swept the man's legs with a low kick that sent him crashing onto the pavement. The pipe clanged beside him. From the rear, one of the bikers revved his motorcycle and charged forward, using the full weight of the bike as a weapon. Mike waited until the last second, then sidestepped with perfect timing. As the bike roared past, he snatched a loose metal rod from a trash bin and brought it down onto the front wheel. The impact sent the rider flying through the air, landing hard against the concrete wall, groaning in pain. The last biker jumped from his motorcycle, pulling a folding knife from his pocket. "You think this makes you a hero?" he spat, voice trembling from rage and adrenaline. "You're nothing but an old man with a name." Mike didn't blink. "That name's enough." The man lunged. The blade came fast, sharp, aimed for the ribs. Mike sidestepped, grabbed the man's wrist, twisted sharply. The knife clattered to the ground. With a fluid motion, he grabbed the man by his jacket, pivoted, and flipped him over his shoulder, slamming him flat onto the pavement. Silence fell. All four bikers lay groaning in the alley, their plans shattered, their egos bruised beyond repair. Mike stood above them, unmoving, breathing slow and controlled. At the far end of the alley, someone peeked around the corner. A teenager with a phone, drawn by the noise. Others followed. Within seconds, a small group had formed, cautiously stepping into the scene, whispering, recording. One of the bikers, the bearded one, sat up slowly, clutching his side. His eyes burned with fury. "You'll pay for this, Tyson," he said, voice shaken. Mike stepped forward, his shadow falling over the man. "I already do," he said quietly. No one else spoke. The bikers limped away, dragging each other toward their bikes. One of them turned the engine over, sputtering. Another cursed under his breath, but none of them dared look back. As the rumble of the engines faded, Mike stood in the alley alone, watching them disappear like cowards in the early morning light. A young man in the gathering crowd approached, eyes wide, phone still raised. "Dude, that was insane," he whispered. "You didn't even flinch." Mike looked at him and offered a faint smile. "I just did what had to be done." Then he turned, walked past the crowd, and disappeared back into the city. But even as the adrenaline faded and the sky continued to brighten, he knew the storm hadn't passed completely. It had only shifted, and somewhere in the city, something was still coming. Mike walked slowly along the quieter streets of the city, each step measured, his hood still pulled low over his face. The fight in the alley had ended minutes ago, but the weight of it clung to him. Not physically. His body was fine, unbruised, conditioned for much worse, but mentally he felt the pull of that old exhaustion. Not from exertion, from disappointment. From knowing that even after everything he'd done to walk away from violence, it still found him. It always did. He passed a bakery, opening its doors, the scent of fresh bread filling the air. A delivery truck idled near the curb, the driver unloading crates of milk and eggs. Two children skipped down the sidewalk, playing some made-up game, their laughter light and unaware. Mike nodded at the mother trailing behind them and kept walking. For a moment, it felt like any other day, but only for a moment. At the next corner, he paused. The sound of chalk scraping on pavement caught his attention. On the sidewalk up ahead, a group of children had drawn a giant hopscotch board with crooked squares in bright pink and yellow, and in the middle of it stood someone familiar. Erica. Her uniform still bore faint stains from the spilled coffee, but she stood tall among the kids, smiling, laughing, showing them something in her hands. It was the notebook, the one she'd been using behind the counter when he first saw her that morning. Now it had Mike's signature on the front, a keepsake from a moment she probably never expected to live through. As Mike approached, the kids noticed him first. Their chatter stopped. One of them gasped, his eyes wide. Another, a girl in braids, pointed. "It's him," she whispered. Erica turned, saw him, and smiled. This one was different from the nervous one she'd worn in the cafe. This smile was confident, grateful. "Hey, champ," she said softly. "Hey, yourself," Mike replied. She stepped away from the kids and walked up to him, holding the notebook like it was made of gold. "They didn't believe me when I told them what happened this morning." Mike glanced at the children, all staring, waiting for him to say something. "Didn't believe she stood up to a bunch of grown men," he said, looking at them. "But she did. She didn't run. That takes guts." A boy in a red cap tilted his head. You really knocked them out? Like, all of them? Mike smirked. I gave them chances. They chose the wrong option. The kids laughed, some nervously, others in awe. Another boy, no older than 7, raised his hand. Can you teach us how to fight bad guys too? Mike knelt down so they were at eye level. You want to know a secret? They all nodded eagerly. The best way to fight bad guys is to never let them make you a bad guy too. Sometimes being strong means walking away. But when you can't, when someone else is getting hurt, you don't need fists to be brave. You just need to do the right thing. They looked at Erica, who blushed slightly, clutching the notebook closer. She already did that today, Mike added. She's stronger than most people I know. The kids began asking questions all at once, about boxing, about the bikers, about how it felt to be famous. Mike answered a few, smiled at most, and gently deflected the rest. He wasn't there for attention. He was there to make sure Erica was all right. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. I thought I'd be scared forever after that. But now, I just feel proud. You should be, Mike said, not because of what I did, because you stood up, and you didn't back down. She nodded, biting her lip. Thank you for everything. He gave her a small nod and looked up as a new sound reached them. Sirens, faint but approaching fast. Mike's eyes narrowed slightly. The tension returned. The sound could have been unrelated. This was a big city. Sirens were normal, but his gut said otherwise. He turned back to Erica. Keep being strong, all right? I will. And don't let anyone take that from you. She smiled. I won't. Mike stepped away, gave the kids a parting wave, and walked down the block. Behind him, their excited voices rose again. They weren't scared, they were inspired. He hoped it stayed that way. The sun was higher now, warming the sidewalks, casting long shadows behind every pedestrian. Mike moved through the city as if nothing had happened, his presence blending into the crowd. But his mind was sharp, his body alert. He couldn't shake the feeling that the red-haired biker, Frankie, was still out there, nursing his pride, planning something. He crossed into a quieter neighborhood. Tree-lined streets, fewer cars. A breeze rustled through the leaves above, but it wasn't the wind that made him pause. It was instinct. He heard it again, the rumble of engines, controlled, close, waiting. He turned down an alley without breaking stride, stepping out of view. There, he stopped and looked into the side mirror of a parked truck. 2 figures, following. And they weren't alone. Mike exhaled through his nose and turned slowly, ready once more. Not because he wanted to be, because he had to be. This time, if they wanted a final round, he was ready, but he wasn't just defending himself anymore. He was defending the people who believed in him, the people like Erica. And that made all the difference. You thought that was the end? Think again. Some grudges don't fade, they just wait. Part 2 is coming soon, and it's going to hit even harder. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next.